Mouth breather. Still wet from the shower, but this couldn't wait. I thought of something incredibly important. Um, my entire life has been an attempt to solve an equation so complex that literally every experience I've ever had is a variable in it. I'm not claiming that first off, I'm obviously not done because I'm not dead. There's still some data to be gathered and factored in. But also, I'm not claiming that the purpose of my life is to find the correct answer, it is only to find an answer. An entire human lifetime is spent getting a result and then something, question mark, question mark, question mark, and that leads to some kind of further development, and that's what we're all doing here. That's my belief about the the purpose of human existence, or at least my existence. It's as good an answer as any to a question so vast and unknowable that humanity can never possibly have a definitive truth. Anyway, so I've had a concept for a long time. I don't remember how long, but years at least. Of So I have this obsession with lists of numbers, and I came up with the idea that there was one original universe, possibly this one, and then that became two universes, which then became three, which then became three or four, which then became four or eight. It's purely an affectation of my own personality that I'm going by integers or powers of two. There are certainly other possible numeric sequences, powers of five, if you like that, or whatever. But I'm just going with what I see as being so elegant that I assume it to have spiritual significance. And math being one of the few very unarguable things. I mean, if you're a Marxist, you can argue against anything. You can claim that 2 plus 2 could equal 5 if the people willed it. But for non Marxists, math is the bedrock. Math is the thing that you absolutely cannot argue with because, by definition, the number 2 plus another number 2 has to equal number 4, or else the numbers don't mean anything. And saying that the numbers don't mean anything is just pretentious human self-indulgence of the type that Marxists love. And it's so the number 4 exists whether humans think it means anything or not, so it doesn't matter. So anyway, so I've had this concept of this list of universes, and the list of universes populates itself as a result of going through cycles where every layer of X universes collectively evaluate some aspect of existence in such a way that the next time a cycle of Big Bang and Big Crunch and Big Bang happens, the new set of universes that exist in different dimensional parallels now equals X plus 1, and all of them are all of them are different in some way. So my original thought as to the two universes, which is as far as I got with any serious thought of anything vaguely realistic. The others are all pure fantasy indulgences. But on the theory that our universe might be number 1, I tried to theorize what numbers 2 and 3 were. The first the first step beyond what we know and experience. And basically, my thought process was that it was a life versus death thing, that we have had just existence in this reality, and that people think of the concept of an afterlife and don't have factual knowledge as to whether it's true or false, that can't be proved or disproven. And so universes 1 and 2 would be definitive yes and no answers to the question of, is there anything after death? So that was an interesting idea, but ultimately I don't think it's fundamental enough to be the first of all such divisions. And today, in the shower, I came up with what I do believe. So when I say believe, I mean this is a theory. This is a theory that I like. I'm making it up. It is explicitly not something that I will claim to be true. It is just this is my thought process. So what I came up with is I've always hated the fact that things subdivide into smaller things. This is a fundamental, unavoidable truth of reality as we understand it. You take a rock and you pound it with a hammer, and it breaks apart into smaller rocks, which break apart into sand. And if you had a sufficiently microscopic hammer, you could smash the pieces of sand apart until they got smaller and smaller, until you were down to the silicon dioxide molecule, at which point you'd need something more than a hammer to sever the atomic bonds. But you could then remove oxygen atoms until you were left with only silicon atoms. You could remove electrons from the silicon atoms until you were left with only a nucleus. You could remove neutrons from the nucleus until you were left with only protons. You could remove protons until there was only one left. And then you could go into the proton and smash it apart into quarks. And that's as far as our science has managed to get so far, but the quarks are probably made of something even smaller still. So, in our world, it's a question mark. An even bigger question mark than death is the question mark of what is bigger than all of existence, what is smaller than all of existence as far as we can perceive it. And so that size is even more fundamental than the life or death question, because the size question could matter and function even if no life of any variety, let alone sapient, sentient human life. We are numerous steps down the chain by the time you get to us, which of course raises the possibility that we are not the first universe at all, but that's beside the point. So there's the question of size, and so I hate the idea of things being reducible in the way that they scientifically factually are. My signal earliest memory, to tie to the old time radio subject that I brought up in my video a few days ago, the the earliest time as a child that I can recall being aware of the things are made of smaller things concept was a science fiction radio program from the series known as Escape. The episode was entitled Conqueror's Isle, adapting a short story by a science fiction author of the day. And the concept of that story is that there's a secret island full of super evolved superhumans that are going to take over the world and very gently and kindly put human beings into retirement like zoo animals. All of this predates Magneto and the X-Men by a substantial amount and might have inspired it. We don't know. But anyway, so you got these super people on this island, and one of the things that makes them super is that as a result of just being aware of information that is beyond human comprehension, they can move all of the molecules in their body in such a way that they fit between the molecules of a solid wall, and thus they can walk through a solid wall. Now that's pretty nonsense, but standard of science fiction of the time. It's basically what we would call psionics in modern fantasy standards, of being able to mentally control your molecules. That's obviously a fairly big ask in terms of what we know about science. You'd have a really hard time pulling off how that could be realistic in any sense, but they didn't worry about this back in the day. So anyway, so ever since I heard that story, I was thinking about the concept that a block of wood is not a block of wood. It is bunches and bunches of wood cells, which are made up of carbohydrate molecules, which are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. And I always found that vaguely offensive. The idea that we perceive wood, but there is no wood, so the universe is lying to us. And so I always wanted to exist in a universe of platonic solids where wood is literally just like this elemental substance that is all wood all the way through and cannot be subdivided. You could cut the wood apart, but you could never make it stop being wood, no matter how finely you cut. Whereas in reality, if you cut between the atoms, you would be left with carbon and hydrogen and carbon and water, and then you could cut the water in half and have two gases, which would both invisibly vanish. So the wood is not indivisible, but I wish it was. And so my new concept for the fundamental first two realities after the first reality existed is we make one universe that is elemental, where substances do not subdivide. They can be transmuted elementally into each other. If you take a big rock and you smash it down into sand, you have successfully transmuted it from the element of rock to the element of sand. But there are only a small number of elements. Exactly how many would be debatable, but certainly not as many as there are on the periodic table. Less than 100, let's say. And so each of these is a fundamental substance of the universe, and you can transform them into each other in very specifically defined ways, but you cannot get them down to subatomic or even possibly cellular. That is a fantasy universe that I'm very interested in, that would be very different from ours, where what we consider to be science just wouldn't work even remotely on the most fundamental level, because almost everything that is true in our universe has been declared untrue in order to fit this elemental mandate. So anyway, that's one of the two universes where the answer of can substances be subdivided is defined definitely as no. The other one takes even more explaining. So while I was taking umbrage at this subdivision of reality, it was, one response to my displeasure was to say this just won't be true. But the other direction is to go more towards the idea and say, well, if this is true, what's the furthest reaching, coolest application of this concept that everything is made of smaller things? And I can claim very little credit for this concept because it is almost entirely cribbed from a movie that most people think is bad, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And I have seen it dozens and dozens of times. And most people would say that it's nonsense, and they may be right. The writers may just not have thought things through and were just throwing crap at the wall. But when I look at that with my highly unusual form of intelligence, I see the outlines of a coherent pattern that suggests itself. And so the movie in question is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania from 2023, I believe. I considered going to see that movie on the day that my house burned down. In retrospect, I'm sort of glad that I stayed home because that was my last chance to stay home in that house. So I did not see that movie until a couple of years later, but I had wanted to see it before the disaster, and once my life settled into order again, I started planning to see it finally, and eventually I did. I think I rented it from YouTube, but I know I bought it after having seen it once or twice. And since then, it has become a staple that I regularly go back and go to. One of several movies that I would just watch over and over and over again. Another one's Galaxy Quest, which I have a huge obsession with. Another one is Shazam, which I haven't tried to do any of my weird creative projects with other than in a strictly mechanical design sense. But anyway, so the Quantumania concept. Ant-Man has the power to shrink. And it's always annoyed me that in the first Ant-Man they gave an explanation that makes it sound plausible why Ant-Man is able to shrink down to the size of an ant and would make him stop there, and they immediately throw it away at the end of the movie so that he can go to the quantum realm. And that ties in well with the other MCU movies, but in my opinion, it hurts the Ant-Man character a lot. But I didn't care that much about the Ant-Man character to begin with, so I'm okay with it because it eventually resulted in this movie. So in Quantumania, ignoring everything about the whole Kang story, which is, Marvel nerds have covered that subject. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the quantum realm itself. It was very, very briefly featured in the end of the first Ant-Man movie and given very short shrift. It was briefly touched on in the second movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp, no colon. And then in this movie, it is they were abducted down to it by MODOK working for Kang, and everything proceeds from there. And it differs from both of the previous portrayals, which are suggested to have been higher levels on the stack as you shrink down through them. So you go down to atomic size, then you go smaller, and you find the first level, which is the end of the first Ant-Man movie. Go smaller again, and you find the second Ant-Man movie, and then you go smaller a third time, and you get to the third Ant-Man movie. So it makes sense in that sense. Now, for the other half of this puzzle, I have to go to one of my former favorite YouTube channels, a channel called Kurzgesagt in a Nutshell. I used to think these guys were great because they did very simple layman's explanations of big scientific concepts. They completely lost my faith when they rolled back some of their own previous findings as having been supposedly inaccurate, but really just too controversial and upsetting people, and so they bowed to political pressure to not to retract these statements, and I considered that a betrayal, so I stopped watching them at that point. But prior to that, before they lost my faith, I considered them to do good work. And one of their pieces that I accepted as being a good overview of truth, like Wikipedia, I don't 100% believe them 100% of the time, but I assume that they're telling more or less the truth until I find something contradictory. So one of the things they said is that current particle physics has basically come up with the idea that the smallest detectable particles are actually like waves on the surface of a giant invisible ocean of something, call it protomatter, let's say. And so the whole universe consists of 17 different flavors of protomatter, and whenever the surface of the protomatter ocean is disturbed, that disturbance becomes a particle, and these 17 types of particles are what make up our entire universe. So, accepting that as true for the sake of at least designing this fictional universe of mine, which was very, very heavily based on the Quantumania one, I came up with the idea that anything in a fantasy universe that was weirdly inconsistent, and anything in our universe that we call randomness or luck or the interaction of chaotic forces that are impossible to nail down 100%. My theory was that there is a definitive answer for all of those mysterious questions if you get all the way down to the subatomic level, to this mysterious dimension that exists within the proto-matter fields. And so my concept for this universe of, instead of making things indivisible, we make them infinitely divisible, is to accept as true that the quantum realm exists, and say that every fluctuation up to everything that happens on our world is a reflection of interacting disturbances down at the quantum realm level. The visual designers of the Ant-Man movie did a really great job of bringing the quantum realm to life, and I've always thought that it was like at this point, we've had so many movies set in space that the concept of space is old hat to us, and we don't take it all that seriously as being this final frontier that it used to be back when we first started to deal with it. And so I think of the quantum realm as like this new frontier that is what space used to be, where literally anything is possible. We don't know any of the rules. We can't ever look at a thing and say that can't possibly happen. There's a logic to it. There are certain consistent symbols and tropes that get used, but we can only barely begin to make out the pattern, and that is why I love the movie so much. Or one of the big reasons why I love the movie so much is because it gives that impression of being this truly alien place that is consistent to its own rules, which we cannot even begin to guess at. And so we cannot be scientific in that world. We cannot even begin to master the forces of that universe, and we are completely at that universe's mercy because it is just beyond our level. So those are the two universes that I think emerged from the first division between the first universe that was ever possible, and then as a result of this having happened for the first time and created these two realities, everything proceeds to unfold from that into three realities, and four, and 8, and 16, and whatever. That's, again, it's all just nonsense I'm making up, but it killed a half hour of time in a very satisfactory fashion, in my opinion, and that's ultimately all it was meant to do. See you next time.